Thank you. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Cell Therapy Limited, a regenerative medicine company that is in registration with our first product and has a clinical pipeline. The summary is that we have focused on developing cell therapies and regenerative medicines for areas that need disruption, areas where there is a very significant unmet need and where multifactorial modes of action can potentially help patients who are critically ill or who are unfortunately dying from their conditions. And we have now a clinical pipeline, and we have potentially 4 or more products that could launch in the next 4 to 5 years. We've designed those products to meet a specific target profile, which comes from the fact that a lot of the management team and the executive and non-executive directors come from big pharma. That target profile matches what we believe the industry looks for, which is very high efficacy, low cost of goods, very robust intellectual property, and very simple logistics. And we think that that is what you need to deliver for the future in terms of having a successful cell therapy in the market. This is the executive team as it currently stands, and the top 2 gentlemen are the founders of the company. Many of you from the academic world will recognize Sir Martin Evans, who was the first ever person to find a stem cell. He won the Nobel Prize for that. He published his work in 1981 and had to wait till 2007 to get the prize. But his expertise is in finding rare cells. So we have built a company around that expertise, and we're finding new cells every year that have very specific functional activity in different diseases. And the other founder, Ajan Reginald, is the ex-global head of emerging technologies at Roche. And they have set this company up in 2009 and now have both an executive team and a non-exec and scientific advisory board which supports the company as it moves forward. Again, you might recognize some of the names up there. I won't dwell on any of them other than to say that I'm very privileged to be working with this group of people. We recently had some coverage. Some of you might actually recognize the company in terms of the Financial Times article that was a few weeks ago. This announced quite a significant step forward for the company. We've been talking to European regulators about our lead product, and I'll talk to you more about that product in terms of what our phase 3 program might look like. And they said, your phase 3 program looks like a post-marketing study, which confused us. They've asked us to actually put in a conditional approval authorization dossier. So we are now in registration in Europe. And the reason will hopefully become apparent when we look at the results of the first trial that we've presented. So this is our pipeline. The initial focus has been on cardiac regeneration. The first product, Heart Cell, has been tested in a very, very severely ill heart failure population. And this population is end-stage heart failure with their anatomy of the heart means that any attempt to bypass that heart is very likely not to work. So these patients really have no options. And this, we believe, is an orphan disease, so we're submitting for orphan designation. The next 2 indications for Heart Cell are actually very rare pediatric indications. And one thing I will say is that the regulator has been very, very helpful to us in Europe. They actually asked us to look at those indications. We didn't think there were any pediatric indications for a heart regenerative product because children have very, very regenerative cardiomyocytes, but apparently there are, and we're looking at them now. Myocardion is the follow-on product to Heart Cell for much less severely ill patients and will be delivered through a minimally invasive catheter as opposed to Heart Cell, which is injected directly into the heart during open heart surgery. And we have a few other products. The one I will focus on is Tendon Cell, which is a topical regenerative medicine for tendon injuries, where we have phase 2 data, and I'll also talk you through that as well. We tend not to talk about products until we have clinical data, because we all come from big pharma and we're very, very cynical. So in terms of Heart Cell, that's the product at the top right there. Those are the cells that we have isolated and modified to become very, very functionally specific to heart regeneration. The vial is actually how it's delivered to the hospital. So it comes as a pharmaceutical type product ready for injection. We've designed this to have less than 10% cost of goods, and it's protected by a very robust patent library. We are, as I say, looking at an orphan designation in Europe and US and Japan, which will give us market exclusivity in those territories as well. This is why everyone is getting excited. We've only tested this in a small number of patients, so these results are just promising. They're not definitive at this stage, but this is the first ever patient. So Nick is not his real name. Nick is our first patient. Back in almost exactly 3 years ago to the day, he was the first patient to receive heart cell. He had had multiple MIs from the age of 40. He was treated at the age of 49. He had nearly half of his left ventricle was fibrous scar tissue, and he had a very, very low heart function of only about 27%. He was going to die in the next few months. He went under surgery and received the first ever dose of heart cell, which was injected in the, you'll see the scan, the preoperative scan of his heart. That part of his heart circled was identified by the surgeons as an area that was unable to be revascularized. It was too scarred, it was too, the anatomy of the heart was too complex to be able to bypass. And that's where we injected. And then 4 months later, there was some remodeling going on, and we believe that these cells have an activity of between 3 and 6 months. And then by 12 months, you see a significant reperfusion of that area. And that area was dead. That area was scar tissue. But the scar has reduced down to about 22% in Nick, and his function has improved dramatically. And he's now up and kicking a football about with the grandchildren. So a very, very significant improvement in one patient. But if you look at the overall patients, hopefully you can read the smallest fonts known to mankind up there. But there were 11 patients in an open label study. We did ask for placebo, but we were refused on ethical grounds. No one likes to inject into the heart of someone who's going to die. So we ran an 11-patient open label study, and we found that in these critically ill patients, after 12 months and now a follow-up of 28 months, they're all still alive. They've had no major adverse cardiac events, so no additional MIs, no additional revascularizations, and no readmissions to hospital on cardiac grounds. This has been driven by the fact that they've had a 30% improvement in heart function, in left ventricular ejection fraction, 40% improvement in the size of their scar, and a 70% improvement in quality of life as a result. Now, I'm just going to talk to you through why the European regulators got excited. Again, this is a promising, small, open-label study, but they asked us to run this analysis. So this is a survival curve. The top blue line is the 100% survival we saw in our patients. The next line I want you to look at is the grey line, which is anyone with a New York 4 diagnosis, what happens to them after diagnosis. So they have a very poor prognosis. But if you perform bypass surgery on these patients, you do improve their prognosis up to the orange line. So there is some improvement using bypass surgery. But in the patient population we selected, which were at very high risk of having an incomplete revascularization, you see a 42% increase in mortality versus those that have complete revascularization. So you should then look at the dark brown line. So at 28 months, 8% of those patients are still alive. 92% have died. This is why the European regulator has asked us to go forward with a conditional approval. So this is how we're thinking about the opportunity for our cardiovascular franchise. Heart Cell is focused on those patients who are undergoing bypass surgery, who are at risk of incomplete vascularization. In the world, there are only 800,000 bypass surgeries a year, and about 37% of those patients are incompletely revascularized. That is our market for Heart Cell. It's an orphan market. It's a rare disease. But the follow-on product is myocardion for the much more mild to moderate patients. There are millions of patients, so that's a much broader opportunity. And then Kawasaki's disease and Bland-White-Garland syndrome, which we mentioned earlier, those are the pediatric populations. Again, mentions Tendon Cell. Tendon Cell is the first regenerative topical medicine to be tested in humans. It is a very highly concentrated platelet growth factor product where we have the ability to strip all of the membrane fragments from the platelet growth factors and deliver that product transdermally through a gel. And we tested this in the moderate tendon injury patients, those that if it gets any worse, they will need surgery. And we found that under a control of both arms getting physiotherapy, which is the standard of care, adding Tendon Cell in dramatically improved the clinical outcome after 6 weeks. So that is again another demonstration of the ability to develop a regenerative medicine that is effective, simple to use, low cost of goods, which this has, and is protected by intellectual property. And again, I won't dwell on this, but there are many, many injuries to tendons around the world every year. I'm sure if I asked you to put your hands up, many of you will say that you have had or still have one of these injuries. So this is an area that we would most likely look to out-license because it's such a huge market. Getting on to how we capture the value of our technology, we look at the cell surface receptors to characterize our cells. This is how traditionally companies look at their cells to not only understand what those cells can do, but also put intellectual property around them. We look at 369 surface receptor markers, and we look at both the expression and the level of expression of those markers versus the current competition, which look at only a small handful of those markers. So we're very highly characterizing and protecting our cells. And because of that, we're able to select cells which are highly homogeneous and also very, very easy to grow in the laboratory. So we only need 4 doublings to get to the population that we need to treat. Very low cost of goods are driven by this, but also very quick time to actually develop those products into a therapeutic. And then in terms of the manufacturing, we have EMA and FDA-approved facilities. We are stockpiling for launch. The European launch looks like it could be early 2017. Should all go well with the European conditional approval process. And then 2018 onwards for the US and other markets. So in summary, we have a disruptive technology, a platform technology, which is producing very significant results in the clinic and a pipeline which is close to market. And I hope you are as excited as we are about this opportunity. Thank you.